Apologies. Hello and welcome. We are so glad to have you with us. This is our monthly PD webinar series here at IFMA, and we are so glad that you could join us. My name is Starlin. I am an account manager here at IFMA in the professional development department. So I get to have an amazing job where I get to see people's lives change every day. And I'm so glad that you could join us today for an engaging discussion talking about empowering excellence and how to discuss the business case for FM credentials. To get started, I want to go ahead and let everybody have some time to join and just kind of relax in. I know some of you may be transitioning either from your workday or joining us on a lunch break. So as you are settling in, please feel free to let us know where you're joining from. Warm up those keyboards and just let us know. I am joining from the Houston area of Texas in the United States. And I am very grateful to have two very special guests with me today. One of those will be Kim Jackson, our Executive Director of Business Development. And we will be having another guest, as you can see on screen, that will be joining us here in just a few minutes. Kim, welcome. How are you today?
Hey, thanks so much, Starlin. Yeah, I'm doing great. Dealing with seasonal allergies, as maybe some folks can identify with. I'm also in Houston, and here the saying is if you don't have sinus issues when you move here, eventually you might just develop them. But otherwise, doing great, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. It's going to be a wonderful one. Well, before we kick into the conversation and the webinar, I want to let everybody know a little bit about IFMA. This may be your first time joining us. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background. So IFMA stands for the International Facility Management Association. And we have been in the industry for over 45 years now, which is just unbelievable. We are made up of over 25,000 members worldwide. And whenever I say worldwide, I mean it. We are in over 130 countries. So, what do? We help you do your job to the best of your ability. So, we advance our collective knowledge, and that's not just me and Kim, that is the entirety of our organization. And the top minds in FM advance their collective knowledge to bring value to you, to help you grow as a facility management professional. Sorry, that's a mouthful, to perform at your highest level. And one of the ways that we do that is through our training and credentials, which we will be discussing some of those today and helping you come up with the business case. If you're an employee looking to expand your career, we're so glad you're here. If you're an employer looking at maybe working this into next year's budget, we're glad you're here as well. We're going to be going over several different aspects today. So without further ado, Kim, I'm going to let you introduce our special guest.
Yes, joining us, the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Williams. Jeff has been a part of IFMA for a number of years, probably since before he was legal to work. Wink, wink. There's a lot of knowledge and expertise that Jeff brings, not only as a facility manager, but such a passion to help the next generation or that next FM achieve greater growth in their individual careers. And he's going to bring that insight today as we look at credentials and what they can do. So, Jeff, I don't know if there's anything else you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the interesting thing about our profession, and Starlin talked about how long IFMA's been around and facility management is a profession roughly the same amount of time, but it's still one of those professions where people find their passion for it, possibly mid-career, maybe early on in their career. I, as an intern, took a job as a consultant working for facility management. And so the cohort that's here today probably didn't say they wanted to be a facility manager when they grow up. So the power of education is something that we can unlock together in that journey.
Yes, yes. And I don't think I shared did I share that I know your home base is Toronto, Canada, but you travel quite extensively.
Yes, yeah, I'm on the road around 10 months a year, literally 10 months. So I've been teaching in Europe, I've been teaching in the United States. I've spent probably about 5 months in the Middle East between Saudi and UAE. So for me, it is 8 o'clock in the evening right now.
Well, thank you for joining us and making that time. I wanted the folks listening this webinar, whether it's right now or the recorded version, to know that you have the opportunity to talk to a lot of different facility professionals throughout the globe. It's not, and IFMA is global, not only in our reach that Starlin shared, but in the content. It's global content. This is not US based, it's not UAE based. It truly is at that global level where we all have that common denominator within this profession.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's really great. I think that's the best thing about my job is meeting new people almost every week. So yeah, it's awesome.
Wonderful. We are so glad to have you with us today, Jeff. So thank you so much for joining. I want us to go ahead and kick into the actual presentation. So the first thing we're going to be discussing today is the power of professional credentials, what FM credentials are, why they matter. So FM credentials are something that IFMA has developed that are accredited credentials that we offer, and we're going to go over them in detail here in just a little while. But Jeff, Kim, do you want to go ahead and kind of start off with why do these things matter?
hmm I think I'm going to pose a question for you, Jeff, and then
Sure.
feel free to expand. So, when you are working in a job, that job may be okay, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to go home. What we're looking at here is when you're looking at your career and you want to increase your earning potential, you want to do your job better, you want to have everything at your disposal. When you're looking at your profession, and there's a lot of professions out there, a professional credential is, in my mind, applied learning that is specific to that profession versus if you think of a college degree or any additional external learning, it could be more generalized and it's valuable, but this is exactly what you need to know. And it builds on that. So, Jeff, in that perspective, the IFMA credentials, what do you see as that power that it brings
Yeah,
in?
well, I think, we talked a little bit about this a couple days ago, but the idea of finding a way to anchor your knowledge against something that has a tangible element like the FMP, the SFP, or the CFM, but also to fill the gaps, right? Because if we didn't say we wanted to be a facility manager when we grew up, we learned on the fly, right? And so we may have learned the way our business does something. We may not have learned a best practice, a tip or a trick, and we can learn from others, not just the instructors in the IFMA programs, but the content and other people in the courses, to start to anchor your knowledge and find a voice that you can start to be a little bit more strong in the way that you speak. I think I was describing to somebody recently, when I first started in this profession, you'd go to kind of a networking event for IFMA, and the facility managers would be sitting down at a corner at a table talking to each other, and you could see the kind of the associate members kind of wandering around looking to meet people. What I'm starting to see is a lot different approach to facility management, because really describing the benefit of the credentials starts to describe the benefit of facility management to the demand organization, to the company that you work for. And that leads you to talking the language of the corporate leaders, which is, I think, really powerful to start to get to what you're talking about, which is growing your career and growing your salary potential.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And I think that you just made a really powerful point that linking um, the confidence behind feeling like you have a voice, being able to show that what you know is credible and is valuable, and that your leadership needs to hear what you have to say, whether or not that may be your personal, where you said maybe you are potentially more introverted or something along those lines. Your voice still needs to be heard, and these credentials can really give you the confidence, the competence, and the credibility. So I really feel like that is kind of where it all meets together, where you can have your voice heard, but and it's teaching you how to think, not what to think. Kim, I'm actually taking that from you. I've heard you say that before. These credentials teach you how to speak with your leadership and how to build business cases for what you're needing. So, um, Kim, do you have anything to add to that before I want to
Yeah.
start kind of engaging some of our folks? But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think this slide sums it up nicely. So Jeff was talking about competence. And if you learn on the job, that's fantastic because you're learning valuable knowledge and information. But there could be gaps. There could be best practices that are not known to be shared. And any kind of formalized training is going to help you fill those gaps, which leads to confidence because you will know that what you're saying has value. And just having the confidence to speak up is going to help you get things done that maybe you had some barriers, you had some challenges, you're going to be able to work around that. And then the credibility, it just leads all back into your competence and your confidence. So having a because we're talking about the power of a professional credential, it will give credibility. It is a third party. It's not your company and an internal certification that your company may have. This is external. It's portable. That's for the value of IFMA credential. It's not specific to any one industry. It's not just specific to healthcare or to hospital. Well, I said healthcare, but academics, um, airports. This is going to be any facility. So it gives you a little bit more freedom because you may want to change things up. There could be some positions at other organizations that you're like, I'm ready for a new challenge. I've been doing this for a while. I want something completely new. And in facility management, Jeff, I think you can change your day-to-day job and what you're doing simply by changing the type of facility that you're managing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, our role is to enable the success of the company that we're supporting. And so facility management looks wildly different between any of those vertical markets that you described. Healthcare is one of those ones that's about keeping people alive. It's very different than trying to promote productivity in an office building. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So PD is very, I think, professional development, achieving a professional credential is really important. And that may actually, I think, Sarlin, lead us into the next segment because you were saying, let's engage people. Let's get those
Yes.
keyboard warriors working.
Yes, so I got to see quite a few people answer where they were joining from. Thank you so much for joining us from all the different wonderful places across the world. But we really want you engaged in our conversation today as well. And we want to hear from you. So we are actually going to be having an interactive poll that will be coming up on your screen here in just a moment. Please scan this QR code. So it's actually going to be a couple of polls that we're going to be running. The first question is going to be, what does professional development look like in your organization? So the question may come up and say PD, that stands for professional development. So you're going to have a few choices to choose from here. On the job training, coaching and mentoring, sponsored training, whether it be external, like something like IFMA, as Kim mentioned, or internal, whether you just attend conferences and events and do your professional development there, or is it yourself? Are you kind of relying on yourself to grow in your career? So we want to hear from you. What is your experience? And then I want to kind of talk about those different options amongst us while people are putting in their responses. And then I'll talk about the next poll in just a moment. So, Kim, as far as what you have heard, and I can speak for myself, is the different people that I hear every day, a lot of times it's on the job training. But in your experience, out of the options that we've mentioned, what are some of the main ones that you typically hear folks in the FM profession and what they experience?
So absolutely on the job training, finding a mentor, somebody who takes them under their wings. If you're an IFMA member, you could be getting a lot of knowledge from other IFMA members. There's, depending on the company and the size of the company you work for, there could be internal training. But I think there's a large segment of folks that they are the only ones doing what they do within their company. And it can be very isolating, and there's not necessarily somebody else you can go to and say, hey, what do you think of this approach? We've got this big issue. I'm really trying to streamline and make sure it doesn't disrupt the business. What do you think? And they don't have that. So I'm very curious as we start seeing more people respond, where are they getting their knowledge, and what does it look like within their organization? Jeff, you talk to people, not just I have some interactions, but you're on the
Mm.
daily with different groups. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have, like, I'll do a course which is meant to be kind of middle career as a course. And when I get the group of people there, it is across the board. There's so many different kind of experience levels, and almost never have they had anything that is specific training to their profession. So it's always on the job training, or it's always kind of, something that they're trying to source out themselves. And I think that becomes a challenge, especially like you say, when there's no role model, and you're the only person in the business. Um, what I hear regularly is, comments back like, wow, I never considered doing it that way. Or I found out that I was doing it relatively correctly, but you've given me some ideas of how to improve, right? And I think the needing to know piece is something that they're all trying to struggle to get towards. And I really enjoy hearing those stories when I walk in the room, but very few people are educated formally in this world. So in FM world. Yeah.
Well, and
And
what you
and I
just
think, oh, I'm sorry, Starlin. I'll say this, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you. It's a differentiator. So for yourself,
Yeah.
as you're looking at it, it's not 90% of the people have this formalized training. So achieving it is powerful.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when I see it in this market and in others, it is almost, it's less than 3 months usually, and I start to see promotions. I had a student doing, we're preparing for the CFM last year. I got to meet him at World Workplace in Minneapolis, and about 3 weeks after World Workplace, he got an AVP position in facilities after getting a CFM. So I think it's, there is a real connection between proving your knowledge and then building that voice and then going for what you want, finding that brass ring.
Hmm.
absolutely. And I think the results from our poll shown here on this screen really echo what you both just shared. It's very diversified, it looks like, but there's seemingly kind of a tie between on-the-job training and employee-driven training. So it's really left to the employees to kind of figure it out as you go. So the next poll that we're going to be running is going to really lean into what you're facing as a barrier to success, to gaining that training that you're needing, the knowledge you're needing to do your job to the best of your ability. So please go ahead and, if you don't mind, if you can please uh, answer this poll as well, and we'll talk a little bit about each of these barriers as well as we go as you are entering your responses. So, employer support, that's really kind of where we're focusing in today, talking about gaining employer support, as well as some employers may be watching. So, I know that we're going to be talking a little bit more to employees and individuals that are looking to get their credentials today. But on the employer side of things, I know that employees need help as they are facing this. So, Tim, tell me a little bit more about what an employer can do to really help support what an employee is trying to do training wise, whether it be time and at work, things of that nature.
Well, I think it's important to look at what is the responsibility of the employer to their employees. The employer is expecting a certain level of productivity, expertise, and for that to grow. There's always the expectation of development and growth. Even here within our association and our staff, there is that expectation you're going to raise the bar, complete, be more and more excellent, if you will, and just demonstrate that you can do things more quickly and more efficiently. The more that the longer you're in your role. Well, it doesn't happen by osmosis. It doesn't. There's, I think, a responsibility both on the employer side and the employee side. the employer is the one that's going to really reap a lot of benefits from investing in developing their staff, whether it's something internal, we've seen maybe there's some internal mentorships or training that the company is offering, but really recognizing that they also have a commitment to their employee to help them continue to grow and develop and invest in that employee. That builds a trust between the employer and the employee and a bit of loyalty. We'll get into, maybe some retention as well. So that's what I see in terms of that employer support.
Thank you, Kim. And I just want to acknowledge on the screen, you can see it looks like we may have had a technical glitch. A few of the options from the previous poll are listed here, but those top three specifically, the employer support budget and time restrictions are showing kind of what I expected to see at least. And these are a lot of barriers that you guys are facing on a daily basis. And we're hoping to help kind of resolve or at least help with some of the pain points that you're facing today. So thank you so much for participating with us. If there's something that we didn't mention as far as a barrier to success, we'd love to hear in the chat. Just please make a comment and we'd be happy to address that as we continue on in our conversation. But let's go ahead and get started in with the business case for credentials, if you don't mind. They're perfect. Thank you guys.
So this is where we want to, and Jeff, we're going to tap into your knowledge here.
Sure.
What impact does credentialing have on organizations? We've danced around it a little bit, but
Yeah.
in what you've seen, how does that help the organization's goals?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot is trying to translate those business goals into the way that FM can enable that success. And like you and I were talking about earlier, every business success is going to look like something different. But it is really common that the organization only sees the cost side of facility management. But the reality is that the things that we do help enable success for the balance of the organization, right? If we think about a happy, healthy, safe, and productive business, we're not just talking about retention of the facility staff through PD. We're also talking about people that want to go to work in the buildings, want to come back every day, are more productive because they're happy and comfortable. And so those are the kinds of things that become values. The challenge has become, I think, that facility management often doesn't try and make that connection in the language of business. And that is where I find a huge issue. I've had facility managers that work for me. I have some in my courses that they say, well, I don't understand why they don't approve this. And it's because they're not talking in that language.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
think the operational efficiency, how can you improve things if you can't get certain things approved, right? It takes
right.
money to do a lot within facilities, and your point is spot on when you say that if you're not speaking the language, and it is on the facility manager, they have to tie it to the organization's goals. What is the purpose of that facility? What are they meant to be doing? And would a deferred maintenance issue impact the ability of those people to do what they need to do? And does that have a financial impact on the organization? Does it have impact on the people within that organization, their health or their safety? There's so many issues. I often say facility management is wide, but it is deep. There's so many different areas. And in my time here, which I've been with IFMA for over 20 years, seeing the amount of issues that can arise, and these are things where you don't have a playbook for it. You don't necessarily have a defined process, an SOP. In fact, you're often writing the SOPs for your standards of procedures or operating procedures are coming from the FMs. You've got to have the ability to do your job, but also let others help you do your job. And you said too, Jeff, that FMs are seen at, or facilities are seen as a cost, but
Mhm.
it's an asset, and it enables others to be able to function. So
Yeah, I mean, I always look at the building itself. Sorry, I always look at the building itself as a tool, right? And that tool, just like the tool that a carpenter uses as a hammer, is really the investment of that is to get better productivity out of the business. And that connection is important.
and let's not forget, you're going to, other than payroll, the facility is going, it will always be the most expensive
Yeah.
expense. But
Yeah.
there's ways to control those expenses. So I think efficiencies, having a very knowledgeable, well-rounded facilities team can save you quite a bit of money, especially in the long run.
Mhm.
But this is also where that investment pays off. How does it impact your organizational goal? Well, you can begin to do more because you're cutting back on what you're spending on energy, on waste. The amount of money that it takes now to put anything into waste and have it carted off, it's only going to increase as that becomes more difficult. Landfills are filling up, and it's going to be your facilities team that's going to help you not,
Yeah.
find ways to repurpose, right?
Yeah. And every dollar saved is a dollar of profit.
Yes.
There is one thing that I think that there is a connection that facility managers, eventually we're going to get the data to make the connection. And I guess we're moving into data, but this is
There we go.
slightly different topic. When people ask you, or, what is the return on investment of the project that you're doing? One of the challenges is that we've never been able to quantify the productivity gains from the investments that we're making. So we always get challenged on the expense, but we can't support the productivity gains in all cases. And there's huge value in what we do, even just fresh air. I mean, everyone in this on this call will know if the fresh air is terrible, you are not as productive. And if you got 1,000 employees and 5% of productivity is lost because of poor quality air, it's like 50 employees not doing their job each year. It's a huge deal.
Wow. Wow. That puts it in terms that someone who isn't an FM will immediately grasp.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's the key, right? Figuring out how to speak that language.
Because what you're talking about performance and productivity, not just of your facilities team, but of individuals occupying that space, retention and engagement. Again, I'm going to say it's not just your facilities teams. Yes, retention is important. There may be labor issues depending on what part of the world you're in, and the level of qualified and quality candidates, but it's also retention of people in the building. How many of us want to be in a building where the parking garage is unsafe, there's water leaks everywhere, you think there might be mold or something growing in the corner of your office, but nobody's sure, nobody's coming in to take a look at it. The kitchen is not, you can't find a cup of coffee anywhere. And I mean, I'm talking about like worst case scenarios,
Yeah.
but these are things that impact people's decisions to, do I want to work for this company? That's their impression of the company. And the FM is the one that's helping to really create that hospitable area where people feel safe, they can do their jobs and be productive. So
Yeah.
there's your productivity again.
Yeah. Wanting to come back every day is a really important thing for employees, right? Not wanting to come back is the opposite of that, and that becomes a huge issue. We talk a lot about absenteeism, but one of the other metrics is, and again, we can't measure productivity as well yet. I think we'll be able to get there shortly. But this whole idea of presenteeism, you come to work, you sit at your desk, and you stare at the little blue LED light on your monitor, and you do as little work as you can to not get fired, right? And I don't think facility managers typically fall into that, but I do know if we create a poor environment, there are other people in the building that will be doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Starlin, if you'll lead us into our next area of topic.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, because you just have so much insight and experience, you travel the world, you talk to FMs on a day to day basis in a lot of different industries. So you have a lot of insight into how these credentials actually impact team performance, the facilities that these people are running. You have, I know, tons of stories for us that we just love to kind of hear your perspective. We'll lead in with team performance here on you've educated entire teams before. So can you just kind of share some of your experiences with that and what that has looked like for you?
Yeah, I think, one of the common things that comes out of it is when I do an entire group. I did a group for the SFP a couple weeks ago in Riyadh. And one of the things that was coming out of it, and I actually did one in the United States, and a similar thing came up. People kept talking about, well, sustainability is going to cost us more money. And I said, well, it doesn't need to. What you need to think about is, how do we align what it is that we're trying to do as a business with sustainability? And so when I do the SFP in particular with groups, what I do is I spend a lot of time trying to understand their businesses so that we can work towards common goals. And it's always starting from where you are. And then the activities that they do, they're really building on something for their own business. And so at the end of the week, one of the things that we really spent a lot of time on with that particular group, and they are the real estate investment arm of a major pension fund. And so they've got lots of buildings, lots of properties, and of course they want those properties to pay for people's pensions. And so what they came back with is every one of them had an idea that could help be more productive for their business from a sustainability perspective. And it wasn't going to cost more money. It was actually going to save money. And so this is the kind of thing that you get into, or worst case scenario, cost neutral, right? Change the way we do things, be better for the environment, and don't cost the business anything more, right? So these are the kinds of things that I see when you get that team together. They start to think about work differently. I did a course in St. Louis. Actually, I did 2 courses concurrently in St. Louis earlier this year. And it was a very large facility management department. They had 660 employees. We did 40 FMPs for that group. And what I thought was really powerful about the conversations that we had is, in such a large organization, everyone doesn't know what everyone else is doing. And so the team building that came out of what we were doing, and starting to think about how one team could support another inside the organization, was really powerful. I had a lot of fun with that.
Jeff, when you say that it's about the community.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, it can be really hard to build and foster a sense of community. So the team performance, some of it comes from an understanding of what the other person's role is, because now you're actually learning together, and it's a shared experience, a shared language, a shared maybe way of approaching things, and understanding there's best practices. So maybe if somebody suggests we do it a different way, it's not because they're wanting to take over or have their actions be seen in a negative light, but rather go, yes, because this really aligns with what we were talking about when we were going through the SFP or the FMP material. And it's a collective, everybody's rowing in the same direction and have a greater understanding, and they feel that community.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about that when we're talking about strategic planning for facilities. So we get into that a lot in both the CFM and the FMP. And that unity of action is extremely important, getting everyone running in the same direction, hopefully not with scissors, but the idea of running in the same direction to try and bring everyone together. Because you're right, there are often inside the same department professional jealousies, let's say between project management and facility management. But how do we inform one with the other, and vice versa? And we did a project earlier this year where it's been unusual, but finally organizations are trying to say, well, how is the voice of FM going to be understood in the design and construction of a building? And that was probably one of the most fun projects that I'd ever been involved in, because I was able to spend time with the design team. I've got an architectural background, so I got to remember things that I'd probably repressed, and had a really great conversation. And I think we designed a better building as a result.
Absolutely. There has traditionally been at times a gap between design, build, the construction, and then the handoff. Okay, we're all done. Here's the keys to the building. Good luck. Make us proud. Without a lot of feedback into that process from facility managers who then take over the building and they're going, well, how am I supposed to get to that light or bring in equipment that I need? Or I now have this maze, so it sure would have been convenient to have a cleaning closet maybe centrally located, because the amount of time it's going to take our staff to just get the cleaning supplies to where they need it. I mean, there's so many different areas where it impacts the ability to be efficient in the building, and the FMs know that better than anybody else, how to make it efficient.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our voice is valuable. And I think there was suspicion at the beginning, right? And maybe some professional jealousies. Why is Jeff here versus what are the values? And so, I had to find my voice inside that team as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I really am just soaking up all this wonderful conversation and just realizing the value that the FM really brings to each organization. And I think that, I mean, we've touched a little bit on team performance, data-driven decisions, speaking the language of leadership. I really kind of want to dig into a cost savings story, because that also kind of has come up earlier in conversation. Jeff, you shared earlier in the week a story about, I believe it was a chiller, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Would you like to
Yeah.
share that with everyone?
Sure. So in my early part of my career, I was doing consulting primarily for hospitals, and I went to see my customer, and he was really quite down in the dumps that day. And I asked him why, and he says, well, I had my capital plan declined from replacing my chiller plant. So that's not good. He says, yeah, it's 5 years past end of life. And I said, well, do they not understand what the impact is of this thing? And he said, well, I'm not sure. And I said, okay, so do they know what a chiller plant is? And I've done tours of buildings where I pointed out to senior leadership that the chiller looks like it's not even being maintained. And one of my clients actually said, yes, it's really important that that thing is working because we need ice cubes for our business. So I think often what happens is we create a business case, we say chiller plant and a big number, and then we say, here you go, you figure out if we need this or not. And so he said what they asked him was one very simple question: can you keep it going for another year? And I said, how did you answer that? And he said, well, I told them I can get parts and I can get labor. I said, that's not the answer. The answer is really trying to tie it back to the purpose of a hospital, right? Sending people home at the end of their stay at the hospital healthier than they were. If I can't provide chilled water, which means that I can't actually run my operating rooms, usually 100% fresh air at the right temperature and humidity, we're shutting down our operating rooms. And the president is going to be on the news having to defend why somebody died because patients were transferred, ERs and ORs were backed up around the city because the hospital was too cheap to replace a chiller plant. So there's that element. But then there's the idea of the CFO who says, well, we can't afford it. Well, this is where that cost savings comes in, right? They forget that they charge at a hospital by cases, right? You arrive by ambulance, there's a cost. You go to the trauma room, there's a cost. We've watched enough medical shows to know this. You get a diagnostic scan, you go to the operating room, you go to ICU, step down unit, rehab, all of these kinds of things. And a lot of those cases are no less than $2 million. Now, that isn't $2 million that I'm going to pay for my chiller plant. That's how I pay for the business. That's the business's revenue. And if I don't have that, am I a hospital anymore? Well, not really, right? And there are ways that you can get back into up and running relatively quickly, but you'll probably lose a step along the way, right? 24, 36 hours. And that is a big problem, and a little bit different in Canada, but from the United States, that's going to make you choose which hospital you're going to go to, right? And that becomes a customer satisfaction or customer service issue.
Jeff, I have heard from major airports facilities team. Um, my team was fortunate enough to go in for a tour, and they said our number one job is to make sure our boss is not on the evening news having to explain something.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that kind of thing that people forget about, the connection between what we do and the business. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Well, and these have been just wonderful stories and insights. And so I want to transition us now into turning insight into action. What people can do today to kind of start moving towards the things that we are talking about, credentialing themselves, educating themselves, finding the resources they need to have conversations with leadership. So let's dive into what actions can be taken. So we kind of mentioned building a compelling business case, and I know Jeff, you shared some stories, but can we talk a little bit about just the language to be spoken when you're speaking with your leadership?
When you're asking if you can go to a course or you can have a course or that kind of stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I think the important part of it is, we spend all of this money on operating, maintaining, providing user environments. If I could learn one thing from that course and take that away, it is going to be a much more powerful facility as a result. But I think what I find in the courses that I'm in, I was sitting down and having lunch with a group that I'm teaching this week, is it's more than that. The man said, he says, I was worried that I was going to be taking an 8-day course, and this is the model that they use at this particular company. And I thought I was going to be bored. He says, I'm sitting there and I'm excited to be there every day. And I think trying to turn that back to the employer and say, look, there is real value that I can get back out of these credentials. And some of it is basically taking what I know and solidifying it. Others are learning the language of FM, learning these stories. And I think that's a big one, especially when you're in a small facilities team. Part of what I do when I teach is making sure that they get those stories, right? We can't go out into the field and do things, but telling the stories so that they can anchor the knowledge to something tangible.
Mm.
And I do, once in a while, I have calls with various customers that are interested in doing this for their students or for their staff. And I think the thing that locks it down for them is that we always try and contextualize it to that person in the working environment that they're in. You've got tools that you help sell to the boss, but I think, at any point, if it's a larger group, selling to the boss can become a really good and fruitful conversation with Starlin or Kim or the others on the team to kind of get to a point. And I've happily joined for some of those calls here and there just to help support the idea.
Absolutely, Jeff. And
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Kim. Please go ahead.
Go
I'd love
ahead.
to hear yours
Mm-mm.
as well. I was just going to echo kind of, we are here to help support. That is what IFMA is here to do. I mentioned it at the beginning of the call. That's pretty much our purpose here, is to help you be successful. So we have developed some things to help you have conversations with leadership. We have a document called How to Convince Your Boss, even to help have those conversations. And it includes some ROI and metric information that you can share with them of, this is proven that this is successful. This will make me better at my job. This will help us save money, because we want you to be able to be armed with those tools to have those conversations. So we will be sharing some of those resources in the follow-up after this webinar. We will be sending an email with the slides, this recording, and then some of those resources.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, and Starlin, I think that that's really important. Right now you see on the screen, turning insight into action. If you have gained insight that, okay, a professional credential is not just 3 letters after my name, woohoo, why am I worried about that? What it conveys is knowledge. It gives you additional knowledge, proves competency, it validates, and it instills confidence. So if you're saying, okay, Kim, that Yeah, I would like all of that. This is not a sales pitch. This is what is it that you need to do your job better? And that's the action that you take in hopefully having employer assisted funding for your training. But also, I would encourage employers, any of you who are maybe a director or you have a team and you're charged with the development of your team, is to think about how can you enable your staff to really grow and develop and create loyalty and a community in your team that is looking at ways to bring new information. Formalized training is great. That's a great tool. But can you give them any time during their day to where they would be able to study? Can you set the deadline and hold them to that deadline? Figure out what form of recognition that you can give. It could be celebrating them on an internal chat with the organization if there's a newsletter, but it's really about that support. And then as an individual, this is not only a professional, but a personal goal, and celebrate that as well. Add it obviously to your resume or to your CV, but also LinkedIn. Celebrate these professional milestones because that's what it is. This is where you have grown beyond this is a job and I do my work from this time to this time, and now you're looking at it holistically. This is my life, this is my career, and I enjoy what I do. I want to be able to do it better, and I want to set myself up for success. And so I think that's where I really hope people take this conversation. And Jeff, you add that reality to this. And there's, I think, a real benefit to having an IFMA qualified instructor leading the class. There's different ways to do that, which we'll be happy to talk with you if this is an area that you're interested in. But I see that with our new slide overlay, we're moving into really talking about lessons learned from implementing a professional development or PD initiative. And so I'm going to, Starlin, I don't know if you want to kind of set the scene for that and then have Jeff give some of his insights.
Absolutely. So we have been doing this for a lot of years now. The FMP turned 20 last year. So that is our leading credential. And I'm going to briefly go over the credentials here in just a moment. I know we've been saying a lot of acronyms that are very
Mhm.
natural to us because they are familiar to IFMA, but those are some of the names of our credentials that we have available. And so the FMP is the Facility Management Professional credential, which is our most popular. We have over 20,000 worldwide. But we do have other credentials as well, which is our SFP, Sustainability Facility Professional, which has been mentioned by Jeff, and our CFM, which is our Certified Facility Manager certification, which is a little bit different than the two credentials that I mentioned previously. We try to meet people where they are in their career. So as you see with the graphic on the screen here, these are the different programs that we have available. But we have all kind of participated in different organizations and implementing some professional development initiatives, as you mentioned, Kim. And some of the lessons learned there have been that they do need internal support or a champion on their team. They do need to potentially, if you're looking to have your entire FM team credentialed, maybe we start with a certain cohort or a smaller size. And so I know that there are different organizations and we tailor to each organization, but just kind of what are some of the lessons maybe that you have seen, Jeff, with credentialing potentially larger teams as they walk through these credentials?
So I think one of the things that works best is face-to-face with larger groups because it's easier to have a direct engagement for an instructor. But if the larger group is scattered around the country, doing a virtual model works really, really well. And I think I did a group, faith-based group earlier this year, and we did over about 8 months, we did the FMP with them. And I think that the benefit of doing it that way is you get a quick hit of about an hour and a half a week, and then they go back and they think about it, they read, they take the learning and start to digest it. And by the end, the great thing was that it kept people on a pace to actually finish their FMP as the course finished. When we do the intensive courses, like many of the ones that I do, it does take a little bit of self-starting afterwards to go through, study for the exams and write the exams. It's not a terrible burden, but it is something that it's just not possible to do in a 1-week cycle. But both models work really nicely. What I've found though is that every once in a while we'll get somebody, maybe it was their company, maybe it was them, they found the entry point by buying a self-directed course like the FMP, and they say, I'm going to be self-directed. And if it's you and you're thinking about it, you have to understand yourself and your rigor to know that without the rigor of something that is instructor-led, even if it's virtual, is that something that I can actually keep myself on track? But I've heard another kind of few stories from people that say the book, while it made somewhat sense, it made a lot more sense after somebody explained it. So going and reading the chapter and rereading the chapter and rereading it and still trying to get your head around it versus having a person take you through the concepts and then you go back and read the chapter and it makes a lot more sense. So this is really about how people learn, right? And I think that's the great thing about the way IFMA's designed these programs is the learning can be tailored to how you learn best, right? But with large groups, I do think it's great to have people in the same room at the same time, unless there's a geographic issue.
So I think I kind of spoke a little bit ahead, just talking about setting a deadline, and we're talking about teams, and then we also have individuals that are going through on their own. Like you said, Jeff, the reading the material is good. There are virtual options for individuals as well. So if that's something, setting a deadline and then sticking to it, but setting a schedule is also important, and having that schedule of a virtual class can help. So I think procrastination is something to be aware of. We're talking about lessons learned. What did we learn? Well, people will procrastinate. If you've got a group, you need to expect there's going to be that typical bell curve that we've all seen. You have your early adopters, the ones that are going to be, I'm going to be first to get my FMP. And then you have others that are, really kind of everybody in the middle, and then the few stragglers. And each person, don't discount that. I was able to sit in a class myself because lifelong learning is important for all of us, and it was talking about ways that people learn. And some people, especially if you're asking them to get a professional credential, that
Mhm.
process can be very intimidating. So I think that's another lesson learned is you need to understand where people are in their thinking. I will say my first class after college, it was, I won't say the number of years, but quite a few years. It's extremely intimidating to feel that I'm going to now be judged and graded. And it's just, it can be a deterrent. And to talk with folks and get them to overcome that concern. With IFMA, there's multiple opportunities on your final assessments. There's additional coaching that you can get. There's a virtual class you can add if you are finding that you're lagging behind and you're not keeping up the pace on a deadline that maybe your employer set or you set for yourself. So avoid procrastination, put things in place to help you avoid that and overcome it. And if the fear of failure is something also that you're looking at, from an employer standpoint, please know your employee is not being lazy. It can be that this is extremely intimidating and nobody wants to be put in a position where they feel like they may fail. So to combat that, we can talk with you about ways to overcome and work through, and also know this is what you do in a day-to-day basis. So you're learning and improving ways that you do your job. This is not something that is completely unrelated. And so you will have a great chance and possibility of being very successful. So, Jeff, I don't know that we've asked you that.
Yeah.
What is the success rate that you would say, from folks that you're engaging with to finish their programs?
From the programs that I do, a lot of it is an employer sponsored thing. So there's an expectation that they finish. From an SFP and an FMP, I can track it really easily, and it's probably in the 90 percentile. And there are still people like, maybe 2 years after they signed up for the FMP, then they
Yeah.
kind of wake up. It's a procrastination thing, and then they go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And IFMA has a really great resource in Jessica and Marissa and Alan that, they help kind of spur that on a little bit again, right? Getting people back in the game. But with the CFM, this is really a personal journey that you're working towards. And, my experience with that personal journey and your experience and others will be a little bit different. And so what I find is that if people commit to thinking about, after they do the coursework or the exam prep workshop or whatever it is, where are the gaps that they need to fill, and then creating a plan and building to that plan. And I think the fear of not passing had been a barrier. But for a number of years, IFMA has offered the first retake to be free. And so that psychological element that I think a lot of people feel, and up until October, it had been a 4-hour, 180 question exam. It's now 3 hours, 120. But to Kim's point, most people haven't done that since college, right? And in many cases, maybe even in college, there wasn't a 3-hour exam, right? So this is something that there's a psychology behind it. And when I spend a lot of time with my students, we talk about the psychology. For the FMP and SFP, they're not meant to be painful. They're meant to be anchoring your knowledge, and it's content-driven testing. So students know that if they failed the first time or the second time, they have opportunities to regroup, come back, and write that test. And they've got lots of opportunities to do that.
Perfect. Well, I know, Starlin, we're running a little bit behind. So
Okay.
if
Yeah.
we want to move it forward, and then I'm checking some of the questions or comments that we've had, so I'll be ready to pull that up.
Sure, wonderful. So we are going to be transitioning now. This has been just amazing conversation, a lot of value from the conversation we've had with Jeff and Kim today. And I hope that you all have things that you've taken back with you. But we do want to hear from you. And if you have some time to stay with us, we are going to have a question and answer session. So if you have to get back to work, we understand this is recorded and we will be happy to send it out to you. But before you go, I do want to share we have some discount codes for joining with us today. Just as a thank you for participating and being with us. So if you scan the QR code on your screen here, this will get you either $50 off of any of the individual competency courses or our Essentials of FM series, and $100 off of any of the credentials bundles. So the FMP bundle, the SFP bundle, or our core competency course bundle. I know I've rattled off a lot of acronyms. We all have kind of been talking about different credentials today. If you are not sure where to begin, here in just a moment, I'm going to leave this one up for just a bit longer so you can scan it. But we will be sharing a QR code for our Career Compass. It's just a 2-minute survey. It's nothing that's going to take your workday away, but it will allow you to take a quiz and it will suggest where to begin. If you still aren't sure, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Jeff mentioned Alan, Jessica, and Marissa. Those are actually my esteemed teammates. And then myself and Gil, which is another account manager or sales manager here at IFMA, she and I will be happy to hop on a call with you, even with your leadership team, if that's something that you need. So we are here to help support you guys in any way that we can. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and get into the question and answer section. Kim, do you have anything that you see that you would like to bring up?
I'm so glad that you went into the Career Compass. Dilwar was asking us about the best facility management course and the process of getting admitted. And really, the best course is going to be, where are you in your learning journey, in your career? Because that answer could be different for everybody. However, maybe Starlin, you can go into like essentials or FMP when that would work.
Absolutely. So the Essentials of FM is not necessarily a credential, but it is a program that was designed for people who are new to the field of FM or maybe are adjacent. And what I mean by adjacent is potentially if you are in human resources and you are needing to do performance reviews of facility managers, or maybe you are in a CFO or leadership position and you need to maybe just gain a better understanding of what your FMs are facing. The Essentials program is designed for that. It's a fairly short program. It's 10 modules long. It's easy to move through for you to be able to gain a solid understanding of the essentials of facility managers or of facility management. The FMP credential that you mentioned, Kim, is our facility management professional. It's been mentioned several times on the call. I mentioned that it's the most popular because it's foundational. It is something that FMs are facing on a day-to-day basis. It's going to go through project management, leadership and strategy, operations and maintenance, and finance and business. And all of those are not going to teach you how to be a project manager or how to be a finance person. It is looking at it with an FM lens, how to communicate with, as Jeff, you mentioned, sometimes there can be departmental, how did you word it, professional
Professional.
jealousy? Like,
Jealousies, yeah. Yeah.
yes, yes.
That's
So
the
it's
nice way
not
of saying it. Yeah.
yes, you're not going to learn how to go take a project manager's job, but you're going to learn how to manage your FM projects and work with your project managers. You're not going to go learn how to become an accountant, but you are going to learn how to work with your CFOs and your finance team to build a business case for the repairs that you need, as Jeff mentioned with that chiller example. And I don't
So
want to
look
leave
at,
out the SFP. Sorry, Kim. Do you
oh,
mind just very briefly going over the SFP?
yeah, the SFP, we've mentioned sustainability, and that's what this is. It picks up where the FMP leaves off. You have to have a strong foundation in all of those areas that Starlin mentioned to be effective in getting the changes through to become more efficient, to create less waste, to make really smarter decisions, and to start having a circular thought about what you're purchasing for your facilities and what are you going to do with the stuff now that you no longer need or it's aged out, rather than just sending it straight into a dump somewhere. So sustainability, think efficiency. It's the Sustainability Facility Professional, SFP. This layers on a lot of great knowledge and strategy that you can take and apply. Jeff, I felt like you did a great job saying you've got to turn it into action and really think about how it applies to your facility. But again, that's what a great facility manager does. A well rounded facility manager, it's just adding to your knowledge base. So I highly encourage, I think every FM should earn their SFP because it's critical these days.
Yeah. One of the things that I found when we were doing the course in the United States is certain employers right now are not engaging in the sustainability word. But it doesn't mean that the practice of sustainability can't be going on and improving the kind of the supply chain and the waste stream and all of these other things. We just have to talk about the language a little bit differently.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's a shift that's happening in a political environment, right? There's a different focus federally in the United States right now.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, I'm going to switch to another question real quick. For our support team, Jack, or could we get thank you, the QR code off? This one is fairly lengthy. So Rebecca's asking, do you think employers look at women differently with an FM credential? So I know traditionally FM has been a male dominated profession. I'm happy to say that I've seen quite a change in my time here at IFMA in the engagement participation of our female colleagues in the facility profession. I know from our salary research that women in FM actually tend to have a more senior role and they are well compensated. So I think, Rebecca, there's an acceptance, but um, what do you think, Jeff, in just in the real world and not anything specific, just what is your perception on what Rebecca has asked? Because it is a big concern.
Well, and I echo what you described as a shift. I mean, when I first started coming to IFMA, it was a little longer than Kim has been involved in IFMA. I was in high school or junior school. I'm not sure. Middle school. That's what it is.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it was, well, the way I always looked at it, it was fat, middle-aged, bald men, because I was in my 20s at the time. Right. And I don't see that any longer. I think it is actually a much more diverse business. I think what a lot of people see is that the senior people in FM, as the guard is still changing, may have made it to that because there really weren't women in FM roles. But I think as Kim talked about, you are seeing the salaries and the role descriptions and all of those things coming together. And I would say that as an employer, what I have found is that women in FM are often better facility managers because it's something about the attention to detail and the compassion side of it for the occupants that often men are a little bit more blunt, I think is maybe the right way to describe it. And they get themselves in more trouble as a result. So I and that's going to be geographic a little bit. I had a lady that was in my class about this time last year in Saudi, and she was telling me that her boss told her because she's a woman, she will never get to be a director. And so what I did is I pointed her to 3 directors that I have taught who are women in Saudi. And I said, if that's the case, maybe you're just at the wrong company, because that might be a cultural issue at the company, not culturally nationally, but you can find a different place, right?
Just to let everybody know, we've popped up a download the free report. It has to do with what we're talking about, women in FM. So again, just some additional knowledge for you to access. This is free, as it says, the free report. So that's why that QR code has popped up. It has to do with what we're touching on and exploring really. And Jeff, I think what you brought up is an important point rather. There's company culture as well as societal or regional culture. And that may be anybody's signal that you're at the wrong company, and to look at what other companies may better support the direction that you want to go and the way, the company that you wish to work for. There's another comment here, and I felt like this was really interesting. So, hi, Grizzly Bear. Um, it, we're asking, what would be your top 3 advice for someone with managerial experience but not much technical, and they're coming into an FM position? So, Jeff, what would be some advice that you would give to our Grizzly Bear?
Well, I think, it really depends on how technical that person thinks they need to be. But I do think that the IFMA courses, and especially with the instructor led, you can get some of that grounding back to the technical understandings, right? The telling of the story around chillers, although I talked about it as a business element, there's also all sorts of technical things that we could talk about as well. But if you're in that role, make sure you take advantage of learning from your staff as well, right? Watch, learn, try and understand what their struggles are in a day-to-day basis, because you will be a better manager for it. What I've seen a little bit in our industry is because every facility management role is a little bit different. So let's say you are a facility manager for a large scale tenant in an office building. All of the technical services, or almost all of the technical services, are managed by the landlord, right? And so you're not going to pick up that knowledge without possibly education or asking the technicians a lot of questions when they come by. And what I found with people that are really motivated to learn is it does come down to, actively pursuing that information from people that have technical knowledge. But the FMP is a great starting place. Yeah.
Yeah, so pursue some of the specific training around FM, be very helpful, and also listen to your staff, learn what they do. I'm a big supporter and proponent of understanding what everybody on my team does. Walk a day or a week in their shoes, I think would be really helpful. And I think you will pick up a lot on what you need to know. because with your expertise in being management, you've got the language of how you can tell the story of what your team is doing and what they need and the tools they need. That is a very important skill to have when you're leading a team for FM. So you may not necessarily need to be the one turning the knobs and dials on some of the technical equipment, but understanding what they're doing and then articulating that to leadership, and being a support for them would probably be the best way to move forward.
Yeah, and I find that being able to do that helps you make decisions as well. Um, I had a
Hmm.
predecessor at one of the roles that I was in, and that person was not able to understand the technical elements of what they were managing. And as a result, completely trusting vendors. And that is a place that can lead you to really big expenses and useless expenses.
Hmm.
And so trying to understand as best you can and building that knowledge and using your team as support. And for that, you will be a better manager.
Very much. Okay, guys, I know we're way over. I'm going to just go to one more because I think this is really important. The question is from Demont, does IFMA do anything for people who have obtained their FMP to further their career and finding a job, et cetera? I would say, Demont, let's look at the bigger picture for IFMA. We are an association to help create opportunities for you to network with others. And achieving your FMP is fantastic because that is going to be that natural help in furthering your career. IFMA has a job board. It's called JobNet, and I would encourage you to take a look at that. You can put your resume there for free. There's different resources and tools for you. Um, Employers who are looking for FMs will post jobs there. So take a look at the jobs that are available. Again, as a job seeker, there's no cost at all to you. If you are a member of IFMA, also utilize the Engage platform. That is a member benefit, and it will connect you to people in your city, in whatever industry you may want to get started in. You can ask for advice. And if you are in a part of the world where you have a local chapter that you can get to, that's your in-person connection. But it's all about increasing your network and talking with people and putting yourself out there. Jeff, you mentioned before, FMs are not necessarily extroverts. They may not be the ones circulating at a meeting, but in order to advance your career, really strive to put yourself in a best opportunity to have those conversations where you're with others who they're part of your group and they understand you and they understand what your challenges may be, what barriers you may be seeing, and to give you cheerleading, support, and maybe connect you to your next employer.
Yeah, I always
I think,
describe that as, sorry,
go ahead.
I always describe that as figuring out where you need to have courage and using it, right? So put yourself, if you know that you need it, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation using the courage that you build up.
I love that. And that is a perfect thought for us to close on today, Jeff. That is amazing. So thank you everyone so much for joining us for these conversations today. If we didn't get to your question, we do apologize. We are at time, but please feel free to reach out to us at corporateconnections@ifma.org. This is our monthly webinar series. We will not be having one in December, but we will see you in January. So please come back and join us. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.